I never thought moving in with my best friend's family would change everything. But then again, I never expected to need rescuing either. Alex, you're being ridiculous, Jamie said, throwing another box into the back of his truck. Mom's already made up the guest room. She's been cooking for 3 days straight. I hefted my duffel bag over my shoulder, still feeling the sting of my landlord's ultimatum. 3 weeks before fall semester, and suddenly I'm homeless because the building's being sold? Jamie's offer came without hesitation, but accepting felt like admitting defeat. I just don't want to impose on family. The voice came from the front porch, warm and melodic. Elena Martinez stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, her dark hair catching the late afternoon sun. Alex, you've been coming to this house since you were 12. The only difference now is you'll actually sleep here. She descended the porch steps with that natural grace I'd always noticed, but never really noticed, if that makes sense. Elena had this way of moving through the world like she belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. Mrs. Martinez, I really appreciate Elena, she corrected gently, the same way she had been for years. And it's not appreciation I want. It's your company. She smiled, and something in my chest shifted. Besides, Jamie works so much this summer I could use someone to talk to besides the television. The guest room smelled like lavender and fresh paint. Elena had clearly put thought into making it welcoming new curtains. A small desk by the window, even a little potted plant on the windowsill. I hope you don't mind, she said, adjusting the plant's position unnecessarily. I thought you might. Like some natural light for studying. It's perfect, I said, and meant it. Really, Elena? Thank you. She paused in the doorway, something flickering across her expression. We're glad you're here, Alex. Both of us. The first week settled into an easy rhythm. Jamie left early for his construction job, leaving Elena and me to share quiet breakfasts. She'd sit with her coffee and sketchbook while I read, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me over her cup, but she'd always look away when our eyes met. Dinners were different with 3 of us. Elena seemed more animated, asking about my classes, my writing, my plans after graduation. Jamie would eat, and half listen, exhausted from 10-hour days in the heat. But Elena hung on every word like I was discussing quantum physics instead of my uncertain future. You're lucky, she said one evening as we cleared dishes. Jamie had already retreated. Upstairs, mumbling about an early morning? To have so many possibilities ahead of you. There's something wistful in her tone that made me pause. Don't you? Have possibilities, I mean? She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. At 34, the teenage son in a divorce? That left me feeling like I'm starting over completely. She shook her head. I think my possibility window might have closed. I wanted to argue, to tell her that 34 wasn't old, that starting over could be a gift rather than a setback. But something in her expression warned me off, so I just nodded and helped her load the dishwasher in comfortable silence. It was a Thursday night when everything shifted. Jamie had crashed early again, his snores already echoing down the hallway. By 9:30, I'd been reading in my room when I heard the soft creak of the back door. Through my window, I could see Elena on the small porch, settled in the wicker chair with her sketchbook balanced on her knees. String lights Jamie had hung last summer cast a warm glow over her features as she worked, completely absorbed. I should have stayed inside. I should have respected her solitude. Instead, I found myself padding downstairs and slipping out onto the porch. I hope I'm not interrupting, I said softly. She looked up, startled, then smiled. Not at all. I was just ... She gestured vaguely at the sketchbook. Sometimes I can't sleep. Mind if I sit? She nodded toward the other chair. Please. For a few minutes we sat in companionable silence. The night was warm, heavy with the scent of the jasmine that climbed the porch railing. Elena's pencil moved, in soft strokes across the paper, and I found myself watching her hands more than I should have. What are you drawing? She hesitated, then turned the sketchbook toward me. It was the view from where we sat, the small backyard with its ancient oak tree, but rendered in soft shadows and gentle lines that made it look almost magical. It's beautiful, I said, meaning it. You're really talented. I used to think so. She closed the sketchbook, holding it against her chest. I wanted to study art in college, Had my whole life planned out, art school, maybe teaching, definitely painting. She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Then I met Roberto, got pregnant with Jamie, and suddenly art became a hobby. Something I did in stolen moments. It doesn't have to stay that way. She looked at me then. Really looked like she was seeing me for the first time. You know what I realized? After the divorce, I'd become invisible. Not just to Roberto, but to myself. I'd been playing the role of wife and mother for so long, I forgot there was supposed to be someone underneath. The vulnerability in her voice made my chest tight. "You're not invisible," I said quietly. "Not to me." Something passed between us in that moment, a recognition that felt both dangerous and inevitable. Elena's eyes widened slightly as if she'd heard something in my tone that surprised her. "You see things differently than most people your age," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean? You notice things? It's the way I arrange flowers, or how I pause before answering certain questions. You pay attention in a way that's—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "Never mind. It's late." But she didn't move to go inside, and neither did I. We sat there in the warm darkness, the weight of unspoken words settling between us like fog. The next few days brought a subtle change to our routine. Elena would linger over morning coffee, asking my opinion on everything from the news to the placement of a new painting she'd hung in the hallway. Our conversations grew longer, more personal. She told me about her childhood in Mexico, how her family had sacrificed everything for her education, only to watch her abandon her dreams for marriage. I shared my fears about graduation. It's about feeling like everyone else had their lives figured out while I was still stumbling in the dark, growing. "Up isn't about having answers," she said one morning, refilling my coffee cup. "It's about getting comfortable with the questions." On Saturday, Jamie picked up an extra shift, leaving Elena and me alone for the entire day. I was reading on the back porch when she appeared with 2 glasses of iced tea and an uncertain expression. "Was wondering," she said, settling into her chair, "if you might help me with something." "Of course. What do you need?" "I've been wanting to convert the spare room upstairs into a proper studio space. I have boxes of art supplies that have been gathering dust in the garage, and I thought—" She paused, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Would you mind helping me move things around?" "It's probably too much to ask. I'd love to help," I said. Already standing. The spare room was small, but had beautiful natural light from 2 windows. Elena had already moved out the old furniture, leaving only boxes stacked against one wall, and rolled canvases leaning in the corner. "I want to put the easel here," she said, positioning herself near the largest window, "and maybe shelving along this wall for supplies." We worked in comfortable silence, unpacking brushes and paints, arranging canvases by size. The room slowly transformed, taking on the personality of someone who created beautiful things. "Hand me that blue canvas," Elena said, reaching toward a stack near the window. I moved at the same time, our hands colliding as we both grasped the frame. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through me, not just the physical touch, but the way Elena's breath caught, the way her eyes met mine and held. For a moment that felt like an hour, we stood frozen, hands overlapping on the canvas close enough that I could smell her perfume and see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. She started, then stopped, her cheeks flushing pink. We separated quickly, the canvas forgotten between us. Elena busied herself with organizing brushes, but I caught her stealing glances in my direction. "Thank you," she said when we'd finished, her voice softer than usual. "For helping me reclaim this space?" I was looking at the room, but something in her tone suggested she meant more than just the physical space. We stood in the doorway, surveying our work, and I felt the shift completely that moment, when friendship crosses an invisible line into something else entirely. I was in trouble, and I knew it. But looking at Elena's face, illuminated by the afternoon sun streaming through her new studio windows, I couldn't bring myself to care. July arrived with a heat wave that made Jamie's construction job even more brutal. He started picking up double shifts, leaving the house before dawn and returning well after dinner, collapsing into bed by 8 o'clock most nights. The overtime pay was good for his college fund, but it left Elena and me alone together more often than either of us had anticipated. "Poor kid," Elena said one morning, watching through the kitchen window as Jamie's truck disappeared down the wall. "Street at 5:30 a.m. He's working himself to death to save for college." I joined her at the counter, accepting the coffee she offered with hands that lingered just a moment too long against mine. This had become our routine early morning conversations, while the house was still quiet, the day stretching ahead of us like an unwritten page. These moments felt stolen, precious in their simplicity. "He's lucky to have you supporting him," I said, settling onto the bar stool beside her. It's close enough that I could smell her perfume, something soft and floral that made my chest tighten. "Am I supporting him, though?"
Ow.
She stirred her coffee absently, the spoon making tiny circles that matched the worry lines around her eyes. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just ... existing. Going through the motions of being a mother without really knowing what that means anymore." These conversations were becoming more frequent, more intimate. Lena would share thoughts I suspected she'd never voiced aloud, and I found myself opening up in ways that surprised me. There was something about the early morning light and the intimacy of shared silence that made honesty feel inevitable. "I married Roberto when I was 20, she said one morning, apropos of nothing. Her voice carried a wistfulness that made me want to reach across the small space between us. "Barely older than you are now. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted: a family, stability, someone to take care of me." She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "I never got the chance to figure out who I was on my own." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," I offered carefully. "Getting to discover yourself now, I mean, when you have more life experience to draw from?" She turned to look at me, something shifting in her expression like a door opening. "When did you become so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm terrified most of the time." "Of what?" I considered this, watching steam rise from my coffee cup like tiny ghosts. Everything, I guess. Graduating, choosing the wrong career, disappointing people. My parents have this vision of who I should be, and I'm not sure I can live up to it. Everyone else seems to have their lives mapped out, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. "What do you love doing, when you're not worried about practical things or what other people expect?" "Writing," I said without hesitation. "But that's not exactly a practical career choice." Lena set down her coffee and turned to face me fully, her knees brushing against mine. "Show me something you've written." "What?" "No, I couldn't, Alex." Her voice was gentle but firm, the way she might coax a frightened animal from hiding. "I showed you my art. Trust me with yours." That afternoon, I found myself in her studio, reading her a short story I'd written about a man who collects discarded things, broken umbrellas, torn photographs, forgotten books, and creates a museum of beautiful failures in his garage. Voice shook at first, but Elena's expression remained focused, encouraging. Her head tilted in that way that made me feel like the only person in the world worth listening to. "That's extraordinary," she said when I finished, her voice soft with something that might have been wonder. "The way you write about finding beauty in abandoned things. It's like you see the world through a different lens entirely." "You really think it's good?" "I think you have a gift. And gifts like that shouldn't be hidden away." She paused, studying my face with an intensity that made my skin warm. "Promise me you won't let fear stop you from pursuing this." Day forward, Elena became my first reader. I'd write in the mornings after our coffee talks, and she'd review my work in her studio while I helped with household tasks or ran errands. Her feedback was thoughtful, honest, always encouraging me to dig deeper, to trust my instincts. She had a way of asking questions that made me see my own work differently, as if she could peer into the spaces between words and find the meaning I hadn't known I'd hidden there. "You write about loneliness beautifully," she said one afternoon, handing back a story about a night shift worker. "But you also understand connection in a way that's rare for someone your age. Is that good or bad?" "It's honest," she said, and something in her voice suggested she valued honesty above almost everything else. "I want to teach you something," Elena said one Tuesday afternoon, appearing in the living room where I was reading. She had paint smudged on her fingers and a light in her eyes that I'd come to associate with her creative moods. "What kind of something? Come with me." She led me upstairs to her studio, which had transformed completely in the weeks since we'd set it up. Canvases in various stages of completion lined the walls, landscapes that captured emotion, rather. Then just scenery, abstract pieces that seemed to pulse with life, portraits of people I didn't recognize, but somehow felt I knew. The easel held a half-finished painting of the view from her bedroom window, all soft morning light and possibility. "Been so supportive of my art," she said, preparing a fresh canvas with practiced movements. I thought I could return the favor. "Elena, I can't paint. I can barely draw stick figures. That's not the point." She handed me a brush, her fingers lingering against mine in a touch that sent electricity up my arm. Art isn't about technical skill, it's about expressing something that words can't capture. She moved behind me, closer than strictly necessary, her hand covering mine on the brush handle. I could feel the warmth of her body against my back, smell the faint scent of paint and perfume that had become uniquely hers. Every nerve in my body seemed attuned to her presence. "Don't think so much," she murmured near my ear, her breath warm against my neck in a way that made it impossible to concentrate on anything else. "Feel the brush. Let it move where it wants to go." Under her guidance, I began to paint. Blue strokes that curved and flowed into gold ones, creating something abstract but strangely beautiful. Elena's hand remained open. Elena was quiet for a long moment, considering. "Or maybe you were smart enough to recognize that settling isn't the same thing as choosing." These conversations revealed sides of both of us that we kept hidden from the world. Elena told me about the loneliness of her marriage, how she'd felt like a supporting character in her own life, always adapting to fit Roberto's vision of what a wife should be. Shared my fears about never measuring up to my parents' expectations, about feeling like I was always pretending to be more confident than I actually was. "Roberto wanted me to be grateful," she said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "Grateful for the house, the stability, the role of being his wife. But I felt like I was disappearing a little more each day, like I was becoming a shadow of someone I'd never really gotten to be." "You're not a shadow," I said, meaning it completely. "You're one of the most vibrant people I've ever met." She looked at me then, really looked as if she was seeing me for the first time. "You know what's strange? I feel more like myself around you than I have in years. Like I can say anything, and you won't judge me for it. You make me remember who I used to be," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Before I learned to make myself smaller to fit into other people's ideas of who I should be." I wanted to tell her that she'd never seemed small to me, that her presence filled every room she entered, that she had a way of making the ordinary world seem more colorful just by being in it. Instead, I just nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd been braver," she said. "If I'd gone to art school, traveled, taken chances instead of always choosing." "What do you mean? Grateful? Accommodating? Small?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He looked at my paintings I had some propped against the wall, and he said they were nice, like they were kindergarten art projects. Dismissive way, she said. Nice made my chest tighten with anger. He's wrong, is he? Sometimes I think I'm fooling myself, playing at being an artist when I'm really just a divorced mother trying to fill empty hours. Stop. The word came out, sharper than I'd intended. Don't let him diminish what you've accomplished. Your art is extraordinary, Elena. You see beauty in ways that take my breath away. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something crack in her careful composure. Alex, but Jamie's key in the front door cut her off, and she quickly turned away, busying herself with wiping already clean counters while I retreated to safer ground. 3 days later, Jamie went out with coworkers for the first time all summer drinks to celebrate the end of a particularly brutal project. Elena seemed nervous all day, distracted in a way that made me want to ask what was wrong but afraid of the answer. I'll probably be late, Jamie called as he headed out the door. Don't wait up. The silence that followed his departure felt loaded, expectant. Elena moved through the house like she was looking for something she'd lost, picking up books only to put them down again, starting conversations only to trail off mid-sentence. I think I'll paint for a while, she said finally. Disappearing upstairs, I tried to read, tried to write, tried to pretend I wasn't listening to every sound from her studio. When the painting stopped and I heard nothing but silence, I found myself climbing the stairs without conscious decision, the studio door was open. Elena stood in front of our collaborative painting, the swirls of blue and gold we'd created together during that charged afternoon weeks ago. She wasn't painting. She was just staring, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. Elena, she didn't turn around. "I can't stop thinking about you," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I know I shouldn't, but, Elena," I interrupted, stepping into the room. "I feel it too." That's when she turned, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Not vulnerability or uncertainty, but resolve, decision, like she'd been wrestling with something and had finally chosen a side. "Come with me," she said, extending her hand. I took it without hesitation, letting her lead me out of the studio and down the hallway toward her bedroom. At the doorway she paused, turning to face me with that same expression of quiet determination. "Need you to understand something," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "This isn't confusion or loneliness or some kind of midlife crisis." She looked directly into my eyes. "I know exactly what I'm doing, Elena. This is choice, Alex. Conscious, deliberate choice. I'm choosing you, choosing this, choosing to stop pretending I don't feel what I feel." The hallway felt suspended in time, her words hanging between us like a bridge I could either cross or turn away from. I could see everything in her face. Courage it had taken to say those words, the fear of what my response might be, the hope she was trying not to show. "Are you sure?" I asked, not because I doubted her feelings, but because I needed her to be certain. Needed this to be as real for her as it was for me. "I've never been more sure of anything," she whispered. Elena's bedroom was softly lit by a lamp on the nightstand, casting everything in warm, golden light. We sat on the edge of her bed, not touching at first, the weight of what we were admitting settling around us. "I've been fighting this for weeks," she said, her hands folded in her lap. "Telling myself it was inappropriate, that I was reading too much into moments, that you couldn't possibly... ... She trailed off, shaking her head. "I've been fighting it too," I admitted. The guilt about Jamie, the age difference, wondering if I was imagining the connection between us. "You weren't imagining it," she turned to face me more fully. "I haven't felt this way about anyone in years, maybe ever. With Roberto it was comfortable, expected. She searched for words. "This is like waking up." Talked through the night, exploring the landscape of what we felt for each. Other Elena told me about the loneliness that had become so constant she'd stopped noticing it. How my presence had reminded her what it felt like to be truly seen. I shared my fear that I was falling for someone I could never really have. Someone whose life was so different from mine. "I won't apologize for caring about you," Elena said, as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the windows. "I refuse to feel guilty for the first genuine connection I've had in years." "I don't want you to apologize," I said. "Jamie, he's my best friend, Elena. He trusts me. I know." Her voice was soft, sad. "I know how complicated this is. But I also know that what we have is real and rare and worth protecting. We decided we needed to be careful, to keep our connection private until we could figure out how to navigate the complexity of our situation. Neither of us wanted to hurt Jamie, but neither of us could pretend anymore that what we felt didn't exist." As the sun began to rise, painting the room in soft pastels, Elena turned to me with that same quiet resolve she'd shown in the hallway. "I don't know what happens next," she said, "but I'm not running from this anymore." I leaned toward her slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she met me halfway. Our first kiss was gentle, tentative, not the desperate, passionate embrace of movies, but something tender and honest and full of promise. It tasted like coffee and possibility. Like all the words we'd shared in quiet moments, and all the ones we hadn't yet found when we broke apart. Elena rested her forehead against mine, her eyes still closed. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. And for the first time in weeks, the future felt like something we could face together, rather than something that would inevitably tear us apart. The weeks that followed our confession brought a delicate new rhythm to our days. Elena and I moved through the house with a heightened awareness of each other. Every glance carrying weight, every casual interaction layered with meaning only we understood. We became experts at stolen moments, brief touches when passing in hallways, meaningful looks across the dinner table, conversations that carried double meanings Jamie couldn't decipher. Our mornings remained sacred. Jamie's early departure for work gave us an hour of honest intimacy over coffee, where we could speak freely and touch without pretense. Elena would sit closer now, our knees brushing as we shared the newspaper, her hand finding mine across the small table. These moments felt both natural and precious, like finding something valuable you'd thought was lost forever. I dreamed about the art show again, Elena said one morning, her fingers tracing patterns on my palm. The one where someone actually buys a painting and takes it home to hang on their wall. It's not a dream, I told her, lifting our joined hands to kiss her knuckles gently. It's a plan. You're too talented to hide your work in this studio. Forever, she smiled, the expression transforming her entire face. When did you become my biggest believer? The moment I saw you truly happy, I said, meaning it completely. Our relationship existed in these quiet spaces, the early morning kitchen conversations, the evening walks when Jamie thought we were just getting fresh air, the late-night texts sent from across the hallway when he was asleep. We maintained careful boundaries, understanding instinctively that the power of what we shared lay not in physical expression, but in the deep emotional intimacy we'd built. Elena helped me navigate college applications with the kind of attention my own parents had never shown. She read every essay, offered suggestions that were always insightful, celebrated small victories like acceptance letters and scholarship notifications. When I got into my first choice program with a partial merit scholarship, she cried with happiness for me. You did this, she said, holding the acceptance letter like it was made of gold. Your talent, your hard work. I just helped you see what was already there. In return, I became her artistic champion. I encouraged her to submit to local galleries, helped her photograph her work for portfolio submissions, listened as she worked through creative blocks. Under my encouragement, she began painting with a confidence I'd never seen before. Bold strokes, vivid colors, compositions that seemed to pulse with life. You helped me find my voice again, she told me one evening as we stood before her latest piece, stunning abstract, that seemed to capture the feeling of dawn breaking over water. I'd forgotten what it felt like to create something just because it wanted to exist. You were careful never to display affection when Jamie was home. But our connection was evident in subtler ways, the way we seemed to anticipate each other's needs. How our conversations flowed with the ease of people who truly understood each other. The way we moved around the kitchen like dance partners who'd been rehearsing for years. But secrecy, even chosen secrecy, carries its own burden. There were moments when the weight of what we were hiding pressed down like a physical force. I'd watch Jamie laugh at something his mother said and feel the guilt twist in my stomach, knowing I was deceiving someone who trusted me completely. I hate this sometimes, I admitted to Elena one evening as we sat on the back porch, Jamie's snores drifting through his open bedroom window. Not what we have, but having to hide it. I know, she said softly, her hand finding mine in the darkness. But look at it this way. We're protecting something precious. Some things are too important to expose to judgment before they're strong enough to withstand it. Elena struggled with her own guilt but approached it differently. She worried less about Jamie's immediate reaction and more about the broader implications of our relationship. What if people think I took advantage of you? She asked one morning, staring into her coffee cup. You're 19, Alex. I'm 34. There are people who would see that and assume the worst. Let them assume, I said firmly. They don't know us. They don't know how this happened, how carefully we've handled it, how much we respect each other. But what if they're right? If I am taking advantage even without meaning to? I took her hands, making her look at me. Lena, you've never pressured me into anything. If anything, you've been the one trying to slow things down, making sure I understand the complexity of what we're feeling. That's not taking advantage, that's being responsible. Despite our concerns, neither of us could regret what we'd found. Elena seemed more alive than I'd ever seen her, painting with renewed passion, laughing more freely, carrying herself with a confidence that had been dormant for years. and I felt more certain of myself than I ever had, not just about my feelings for her, but about my own worth, my capabilities, my future. We created unspoken rules to protect our secret. No lingering touches when Jamie was around. No private jokes that might seem exclusive. No staring at each other across rooms. But we also created small rituals that were ours alone. Elena would leave my favorite coffee mug on the counter each morning. I would leave wildflowers from my evening walks on her studio windowsill. We would brush hands when passing dishes. At dinner, contact so brief it could be accidental. Our relationship thrived in these constraints, perhaps because they forced us to focus on emotional rather than physical connection. We learned to communicate volumes with a glance, to find intimacy in shared silence, to express affection through acts of service and thoughtful gestures. Jamie's observation skills proved sharper than either of us had anticipated, while he didn't suspect the romantic nature of our connection. He definitely noticed the change in household dynamics. "You guys have gotten really close," he said one evening, looking between Elena and me with curious eyes. "Like really close. Mom laughs at your jokes way more than they deserve." "Thanks for the confidence boost," I said, trying to keep my tone light while my heart hammered. "I'm not complaining," Jamie continued. "It's nice seeing Mom happy. Yes. Been different since you've been here, lighter somehow. It's like she remembers how to have fun." Elena and I exchanged a quick glance across the table, careful not to let it linger too long. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Jamie's happiness about our friendship was both touching and guilt-inducing. "Alex is easy to talk to," Elena said carefully. "He has an old soul." "That's what I mean," Jamie said, gesturing with his fork. "You two have these deep conversations about art and books and life. It's like watching two people who actually understand each other." "Dad never talked to you like that?" The casual comparison to his father made Elena stiffen slightly, but Jamie didn't notice. He was too busy being pleased about his mother's improved mood to question its source. "Honestly, Alex, I think you're better for Mom's social life than any of her actual friends. She's been painting nonstop. She's been singing while she cooks. I haven't seen her this happy in years." These conversations reinforced both our care for Jamie and the complexity of our situation. We could see how much he loved his mother, how genuinely pleased he was by her happiness. The knowledge that we were partially responsible for that happiness was both gratifying and terrifying. "He's a good kid," Elena said later, as we cleaned up after dinner. "He deserves honesty." "Does," I agreed, "but not necessarily right now. Not when we're still figuring out what this is ourselves." "When do we tell him?" "I don't know. Be when I come back for Christmas break, when we've had time to see if this can survive distance and time apart." Lena nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. The question of timing felt impossible to answer. Like trying to predict whether months in advance, summer's end approaching August arrived with the kind of golden light that photographers chase. And with it came the reality that my time in this house, in this suspended moment, was drawing to a close. College would start in 3 weeks. I'd need to be back on campus for orientation and apartment setup. Elena and I avoided discussing my departure with the kind of deliberate avoidance usually reserved for terminal diagnoses. Instead, we threw ourselves into present moments with almost desperate intensity. Our morning coffee conversations grew longer. Our evening walks extended until the stars appeared. Our shared silences became more precious than words. "I want to finish this series before you leave," Elena said one morning, gesturing toward a collection of paintings she'd been working on, all variations on themes of transition and change. "I need to capture this feeling before it... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "Before it what? Before it becomes just a memory?" We were both trying to preserve something that felt too fragile for the real world, too perfect for the complications that distance and time would inevitably bring. Elena painted with fierce determination those final weeks, sometimes working until dawn, as if she could capture not just images but moments, feelings, the specific quality of light in her studio when I brought her tea at midnight. Her work from this period was extraordinarily luminous, emotional, filled with the kind of raw honesty that made viewers lean closer. "You helped me find my colors again," she told me one evening as we stood before her latest piece. a swirling composition in blues and golds that seemed to move in the candlelight. I'd been painting in grays for so long I'd forgotten other hues existed. You always had the colors, I said, wrapping my arms around her from behind. A liberty I could take only when Jamie was safely at work. You just needed permission to use them. We began creating what we called memory anchors, deliberate moments designed to be preserved. A picnic in the backyard after Jamie left for work where we fed each other strawberries and Elena sketched. My profile while I read poetry aloud. An evening when we danced in the kitchen to music from her college years, moving slowly to songs that had meant something to her before she learned to make herself smaller. A morning when we woke early to watch the sunrise from her studio windows, sitting in comfortable silence as the world turned gold around us. I'm scared, Elena admitted during one of these moments. Not of you leaving. I always knew summer would end, but of forgetting this feeling, of going back to who I was before. You can't, I said with certainty. This isn't something that happened to you. It's something you chose, something you created. The confidence, the joy, the artistic courage, those are yours now. I didn't give them to you. I just reminded you they were there. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. Promise me something? Promise me that even if things change, even if distance makes this complicated, you won't regret what we found here. Never, I said, meaning it with every cell in my body. This has been the most real thing that's ever happened to me. In those final weeks, we lived with the intensity of people who knew their time was measured. Every conversation felt significant, every touch deliberate, every shared glance weighted with meaning. We were creating a foundation strong enough to survive separation, though neither of us was certain what form our relationship would take once I was gone. Jamie, oblivious to the emotional undercurrents, but sensitive to the approaching change, became more sentimental as my departure neared. He started planning last movie night, last barbecue, last trip to our favorite ice cream place. I'm going to miss having you around, he said one evening as we threw a frisbee in the backyard. The house is going to feel empty. You'll barely notice I'm gone? I lied, catching his throw with more force than necessary. Are you kidding? Mom's going to mope for weeks. She's gotten so used to having someone to talk to about all her artsy stuff. If only he knew how much she would miss our conversations, I thought, and how much I would miss being the person she turned to with her dreams and fears. My last morning in the house arrived with cruel beauty, perfect weather, birds singing, the kind of day that made leaving feel like a mistake. Jamie had loaded most of my things into his truck the night before, leaving only a small bag and my laptop for the final trip. Elena and I had planned this moment carefully. While Jamie finished loading the car and warmed up the engine, we would have 5 minutes alone in the kitchen, enough time for a proper goodbye without raising suspicions. This isn't ending, Elena said quietly, her hands cupping my face as we stood by the counter where we'd shared so many morning conversations. It's just changing form. I know, I said, though my chest felt tight with the fear that distance might diminish what we'd built. We'll text, call, email. You'll tell me about your classes, your new friends, your writing. I'll send you pictures of my paintings, updates on gallery submissions, stories about Jamie's college adventures. And when I come home for Christmas, we'll see where we are then, both of us. No pressure, no expectations, just ... possibility. She kissed me then, soft and lingering, tasting like coffee and promises and the specific sadness of beautiful things ending. I love you, she whispered against my lips, the first time either of us had used those words.
Ow.
I love you too, I replied, meaning it completely. Jamie honked the horn, and we separated reluctantly, Lena straightening her hair while I grabbed my bag. As we walked to the car, she caught my hand briefly, squeezing once before letting go. Ready? Jamie asked as I climbed into the passenger seat. Ready? I lied, looking back at Elena standing on the porch, her hand raised in farewell.